Welcome to Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode of Leading People is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's widecircle.eu. Leading People is a podcast which features insightful conversations with leading people about leading people. Yes, that's a play on words. In each episode, you get tips from leading people such as CEOs, HR professionals, authors, and thought leaders on all aspects of leading people, including how to attract, engage, develop, and grow talent to build successful organizations. And we provide insights on how to lead yourself so you can consistently perform at your best. In December, as we approach Christmas and the end of another year, many of us start thinking about next year. For quite some people, it never goes beyond thinking. My guest this week is author and consultant Brian Moran, who is going to explain his methodology called the 12-week year. I discovered it myself a few years ago, and it has completely transformed how I plan my time and where I focus my efforts. It's one of the reasons that this podcast gets recorded, produced, and released consistently on time every 2 weeks. During our conversation, Brian explains the key difference that makes the difference between plans that achieve results and those that don't. Now, I bet you're curious about what actually is a 12-week year. So, let's dive in and find out. Brian Moran, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, Brian, well, we were just saying before we came on air, I came across your excellent work a few years back, and I've been using your tools since, and they're fantastic. However, it's quite likely that many of our listeners don't know yet who you are, and they don't know about your wonderful work and your wonderful tools. And this podcast will be coming to them at the time of the year when it might be very interesting and useful to get to know the work you do. So maybe we could start with, how did you get here to where you are today? Was there what sort of person, place, or an event stands out on your journey to where you are today? Or was there like an epiphany moment or a series of epiphany moments that got you to the point where you're sort of Mr. 12-week year?
Yeah, so oddly enough, there wasn't really, I don't know if there was an epiphany along the way. There might have been a few smaller ones, but as I look back over my life, as a young kid, I always wanted to, when something mattered to me, I wanted to learn to get good at it, right? And I think I got that from my dad. He coached us, and my brother and my sister and I in sports and things like that. It was always about, look, if you're going to do it your best. And so, I would be interested in finding ways to get better, and that translated into college and ultimately into business. And so when I started, I was actually working UPS in the evenings to pay my way through college. My parents helped out, but they weren't in a position to fund it. And they had offered me a promotion into management, into part-time supervision. And I was getting a degree in physiology, Jerry. I was going to be a strength coach. And I thought, I don't want anything to do with that. But, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, what the heck? You never know. And I took that job. And I guess there was a bit of an epiphany. There was this big enlightenment for me about business and management. I mean, I had never grown up thinking about that. I grew up very middle class, didn't know anybody that was an entrepreneur, didn't know anybody that was an executive, and so that was a whole new world to me. But I really loved it, and I ended up working for a guy that was just an incredible coach. And this is back 1,000 years ago, before that was anything in the lexicon, and before from the leadership and all the management verbiage talked about coaching. And so I learned a ton. Decided to go that way. Got in with PepsiCo, moved to California, got in with PepsiCo, kind of had a number of different assignments, and ultimately joined a consulting group. And they were one of the pioneers in recognizing the impact culture has on performance. So that was a heck of an education for me. And then eventually, a couple other things happened, eventually went out on my own. And as I began to think about what value I was going to bring to my clients. Initially, I thought, well, I'm going to bring them new techniques, new ideas. And as I started to do that, I realized that that's not what they need. They all have great ideas. They all have resources. What was really missing was the execution. And so that's where I focused my energies and efforts, was around figuring out, what does it take to implement at a high level? And today, that's what we're all about. I mean, the 12-week year is all about helping our clients accomplish more through more effective execution.
Yeah. I think we'll get and unpack that, how important it is, in a few minutes. So I came across, I'll tell you how I came across the 12-week year. I was running an annual seminar on sort of how to get the most out of the upcoming year. And we were having a lunch break, and this lady came up to me. She said, there's lots of really good stuff for what you're doing. She says, do you know about the 12-week year? And I went, no. Well, she said, you what you're doing is really good, but she said you should get yourself the 12-week year. And of course, my curiosity was getting the better of me at this stage. And so I immediately went and bought your book, right? And I was sitting there going, there's just these couple of nice distinctions you have which make a huge difference. And they're the kind of thing that the difference that makes the difference, if you're familiar with that expression. Yeah. So maybe give our listeners a sort of an introduction, because people are sitting out there, what does he mean by 12-week year? He's talking about a quarter, isn't he? And that, yes, you're not, right? So let's give people, what is the 12-week year in a kind of couple of sentences in a nutshell, and why is it so important to think in terms of the 12-week year? And then we'll start exploring that a bit more deeply.
Sure, yeah. The 12-week year, our clients work in the context of every 12 weeks as a year. And there aren't 4 of those in the year. It isn't quarterly, because a quarter is a part of whole. It is the whole. And it came about because the work we were doing with clients, we were doing what most people do, right? We helped them set annual goals and build annual plans, and they broke them down quarterly, monthly, weekly. But we still felt like they weren't getting what they could. And we were feeling the same thing in our business. And when I say we, my business partner, Michael Lennington, and I, he co-authored the book. And so we came across this concept in athletics called periodization. And it started in the 70s, used with Olympic athletes, designed to create breakthrough performance. And it literally works so well that it's used in just about every sport today in some form or fashion. And so we saw that, and we said, you know what? That has applicability for what we're trying to do with our clients. And that's really where the 12-week year was born. We took that concept, moved it beyond athletics, adapted it for business in a personal setting. But some of the tenets of that are this intense focus in short periods of time. And so we kind of looked at it and said, that's been one of the bugaboos. As we began to work with the fundamentals that drive execution, we were doing it in the context of a year, an annual cycle. And even though there's quarterly and monthly and all of that, there's still this mindset that says, as long as I hit that annual number, I'm good. And that was the barrier. That's really what was standing between where people were and what they were capable of. It wasn't about working harder or longer. And the 12-week year certainly is about taking everything you do in 12 months and crammed it into 12 weeks. It's about focus on a few things and then implementing them and being more consistent with them. So in an annual environment, Jerry, as you know, because you've been working with it, there's an opportunity to put things off. Right? In January, December looks a long way off. And so the mindset around that is, I've got plenty of time. And that's the mindset that permeates the bulk of the year, and we put things off. Where with the 12-week year, that mindset is gone. I mean, it's blown up immediately, right? If you're going to have a great year, a great 12-week year, you recognize you can't have many bad weeks. And that's a game changer.
Yeah. And it's actually the brain has a tendency to over and underestimate timeframes anyway. So as you say, the can gets kicked down the road a lot in conventional 1-year planning, right? And what you've done is you have taken this and you've said to people, get your focus on the next 12 weeks, right? And what can you achieve? And of course, one of the biggest challenges people have with goal setting is either they don't do goals because they've just given up on them, which is probably a combination of the second fact, which is they make them too big. and then they're just overwhelmed and they never really figure out how to get started. And so I think this concept of focus is really important here, apart from the execution. So give us some examples of a type of goal that somebody might formulate as a 1-year goal, and you could translate that into a 12-week goal for them. Can you give me an example of something like that?
Let's take a business setting. If you're an entrepreneur or you're in sales or something, you might have an annual sales goal, right? Pretty common, and they'll break that down quarterly and everything else. But in the end, as I said earlier, you can be behind all year, and as long as you hit the number by the end of the year, everything's good. And the problem with that is you left all this capacity on the table earlier in the year that you cannot go back and recoup. You might make up the gap and hit the goal, but you can't go back and recoup that capacity. And so what we would do in a 12-week year is we would say, okay, let's not just take that annual number and divide it by 4, because that's probably limiting. Yeah. And I like to use the example. I had a client, Audra, call me on, I think it was September 7th. This was a few years ago. And she called me and said, listen, Brian, hey, I just got off the phone with my boss. I hit my annual goal, and it's only September 7th. And she said, it's likely I'll double it before I'm done. And she did. She doubled it by the end of December. That would have never happened had she took the annual goal and just divided it by 4. So the challenge for people, though, is because they've been annualized so long, that's one data point that they have to take in. But what we would say is don't make it the only data point, right? What's the best 12 weeks you've ever had? What do you have in terms of momentum? Right? What do you have in terms of tailwinds and headwinds? What's in the pipeline? What's working for you? And bottom line, what are you committed to acting on? Because the truth is, we don't control the outcomes; we control the actions. So the goals are the outcomes, and so don't be afraid to stretch there. But you have to be willing to do the actions that it takes to create that, and that's the big bugaboo. That's the heavy lifting for people. So if we had an annual goal, if it was $1 million, we wouldn't necessarily say that the 12-week goal is $250,000. It might be more than that, it might be less than that. It really depends on what's happening in that 12-week year. But over time, what happens for clients is each 12-week goal is determined more by the trend than anything else, right? Yeah. So it's not initially you're going to have to probably take that annual number. We think about that as a 4-year vision, if you will, right? In periodization, Bill, in 12-week year, it's 4 years away. And you're going to have to take that into consideration. But over time, more and more of it's going to be driven by, what's been your trend for the last 3 or 4 or 5, 12-week years. And, what are you committed to make happen in this 12 weeks? What would represent great this 12 weeks?
Yeah.
Michael lost 50 pounds in 12 weeks. So he focused in on his
50 pounds of weight. 50 pounds of weight.
Body weight, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Not 50 pounds in the UK as they talk about. But
yeah.
Okay, so he lost 50 pounds of body weight.
Much easier to lose than the pounds.
Yeah, and he used the 12-week year. Can maybe unpack that for...
Yeah. So again, the problem with an annual weight loss goal is it's just, it's so far off that it's so easy to just, not change your habits and not change your actions. Where with a 12-week goal, you're like, hey, man, I got to get after it, and I got to get after it now. And that's part of the key is it creates a sense of urgency, a healthy urgency, not stressed out like some people feel at the end of the calendar year, but just a healthy sense of urgency that has you acting more consistently on the things that really drive your success.
Yeah. You probably know that little question that you ask. 5 frogs are standing on the edge of a pond and 3 decide to jump. How many are left? Yeah. You'd be surprised how many people say 2. Maybe we'll leave that for our listeners to ponder.
Leave that for your listeners, yeah. They get that right, I'll send them a book or something.
Okay, there you are. If you get the answer right, you can send an email to Brian. Send an email to Brian. And one of the other things that, as you were talking about this thing about sales and getting your targets, there's a couple of unintended consequences that happen with the 12-week planning. So people fall behind. You see it in cost cutting as well, So people senior executives look at are they going to get their bonus? Because actually, I always say to people, wherever you are in the organization, the people who want the bonus more than anybody are the top guys. And they look at it in September and they go, oh, the 9+3 forecast is not looking great. Let's cut costs. So they slice the costs out of the business. Often that's travel, T&E, all this stuff, where they could actually be building business. The same thing with the sales. Need to get my sales target. I'll go in heavy on discounting to get volume sales in at the end of the year. So actually there's an unintended consequence to, people might be saying out there, yeah, but we always come good at the end. But at what price and at what cost is often a question to be asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that in so many organizations. Either that or they go, oh, let's just bury everything in this year because this year's lost already, and we'll make next year a big bonus year. It depends on, but it's one or the other typically.
Okay.
I mean, we see people in late August, early September sort of giving up on the year, where we're not going to hit the goal. And so, in 12-week Yearville, that's a year and a half away. You still got plenty of time to make good things happen.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why we're recording this towards the end of 2021 is that anybody listening who wants to explore this has time to get the book, get their head around the methodology, and start putting it into effect from the 1st of January. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you get it now, don't wait to January. Start now.
In the next part of our conversation, Brian explains the key elements of the 12-week year toolbox, how to accept that every plan is flawed, why you've got to fail fast to accelerate your success, and how to introduce the 12-week year in a large organization. But before we continue, a short word from one of our sponsors. We live in a world of increasing complexity and seemingly endless paradoxes. If you're a coach or trainer, and particularly if you work with teams, and you'd like to help your clients develop both their own and their team's adaptive capacity to deal with these challenges, then you might want to check out the Paradox Coaching Academy at paradoxcoaching.co. That's paradoxcoaching.co. Or to arrange an exploratory conversation, simply send an email to paradoxcoachingacademy, all one word, at gmail.com. Now, back to our conversation. Okay, great. So let's unpack a little bit some of the things that you include in, because some of your worksheets are excellent. That's one of the things I would really encourage people to go out and get to know your work for, because some of the worksheets really help. So can you explain to our listeners then the difference between a lag indicator and a lead indicator, because not many people really know the difference. And this is quite important in how you structure your goal for the 12-week year. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it has an effect on it. And so I'm with you. I think a lot of people are they don't quite understand lead and lag indicators. So I'll give it a shot. So a lag indicator is a measure of the goal. So if I have a sales goal, sales is a lag indicator. If I have a weight loss goal, pounds lost is a lag indicator. And they call it lag just because there's a time lag between when I set the goal, when I start to work on it, and when it comes to fruition.
Yeah.
Lead indicators are measures that have a strong correlation to the end result, but they happen earlier in the process. So they give me some indication of whether or not I'm on pace. And a really great example that I think most people can relate to is online marketing, an opt-in, right? If you opt into something, you exchange your name and your email for something, whether it's a white paper, a video series, or whatever it may be. If it's a marketer, they're going to at some point pitch you a product. Mm-hmm. And that marketer, if they're any good or not, knows the ratio of opt-ins to sales. It might be 100 to 1, it might be 1,000 to 1, but they can predict sales much earlier in the process, sometimes weeks or months before the sales actually materialize. That's a lead indicator. And so having a handful of lead and lags is really important in terms of monitoring your plan, because here's the truth, Jerry, every plan is flawed.
Yeah.
There is no perfect plan. The only way you know if your plan's any good or not, you've got to execute it, and then you have to monitor it. So you monitor it with these lead and lag indicators. And in fact, because people get kind of spun around the axis on lead and lags, we say just call them key measures, but just know that some of them are going to happen earlier in the cycle and give you an indication of whether or not the things you're doing are working. So that if not, you can make adjustments. And if they are, maybe you double down on them, or you certainly continue with them.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get 5 new clients, which will turn into X amount of sales, unless you're having some sort of conversations with some people at some stage, and that you know how many of those you have to get some people to actually go to the next stage. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
people out there listening.
Yeah, lead indicator might be the number of conversations I have. It could be referrals, could be another lead indicator. If as long as you know the correlation between the number of conversations and the sales, and if you're tracking that, you'll know the ratios.
Okay. Then one of the other nice things you have is this concept of recognizing barriers, because SH1T, or whatever we want to call it, will happen along the way. So what's the value for people in understanding what can go wrong?
Well, I think, look, as there is no perfect plan, there's rarely perfect execution. And so you have to be prepared for things to not go as planned. And in fact, most of the time when you're taking new ground, it doesn't go as planned.
Yeah.
But you're going to try things. Some of them are going to work. Some of them aren't going to work. The truth of the matter is, if you're taking new ground, the quickest way to get there is you got to fail faster. And so you got to change your mindset about what that means and take that as feedback, right? I go to the marketplace, I take my best shot. As we're monitoring it through the lead and lag indicators and things like that, the marketplace is going to tell me if what I'm doing is effective or not. I take that feedback and I go and adjust. But I have to be okay with failing, with it not working. And I love, Vince Lombardi's famous football coach here in the States, and he said it's not whether or not you get knocked down, it's whether or not you get up. And what I love about that is life is always knocking you down. The successful people keep getting up, and they look at what happened in the knockdown and they learn from it. And that's the process. And the 12-week year facilitates that really well, because you're in shorter cycles. And one of the things that's different with our planning, Jerry, is it's tactical. It's not conceptual. So you're going to know the specific actions that worked and the ones that didn't, which allows you to make those smaller adjustments more frequently, which is how you accelerate your success.
That's one of the things I really love about your system, is that it's a learning process. Because one of the first things I'm going to flag this up for people, the first time you do this, you're likely to be overly ambitious and I'm going to do this, and then what happens is actually it gives you such a great reality check, and it makes you realize actually what really you need to do. This is this emphasis on action to actually make things happen that will allow you to realize the goal or the outcome you're looking for. And also to be able to track it. That's another nice thing you do quite well, isn't it? You really help people to understand how they're doing against where they think they could be in this. And 12 weeks allows you enough time to recalibrate or readjust. It's like the aircraft flying a bit off course. It can get back on course again.
Exactly. That's the process. And so the other piece of measurement that comes into play is we have our clients, as you say, track the lead and lags, but we also score our execution. And the reason that's critical is because that's probably the most powerful indicator you have. When you talk about lead indicators, again, we don't control the outcomes, we control the actions. So to what degree am I doing what I said I needed to do in order to accomplish what I said I want to accomplish? And so on a weekly basis, the system's going to have you score your execution, and you're going to know, kind of as the CEO of your world, whether it's a personal goal or it's a business goal, a little bit of both, where you're at, whether you're 90 percentile or 30 percentile, and you'll know why. And so that is really critical, because, that's the heavy lifting. Anything worthwhile in life takes effort. And that's why we plan tactically, so we know week by week what actions we have to take, and then we're measuring to what degree did we take them. And one of the interesting things in that, Jerry, is that you don't have to be perfect. What we found with tens of thousands of people on the system is if you're typically 80+% or higher on a weekly basis, in most cases, you're going to accomplish the 12-week goals.
Yeah.
So it's not about being perfect at all. But and we have people that score 50% and hit the goals. It's just the probability of you hitting the goal is much lower. Once you get over that 80% threshold in terms of execution, there's a high correlation to you hitting the goal.
Yeah. Well, it certainly personally has helped me a lot. I mean, I run my own business, and one of the challenges we have when we run our own businesses is actually this concept of being able to say no. And they always say the best way to learn how to say no is to be able to say yes to yourself. And so you can only do that when you know what your priorities are. And it's actually sometimes being able to say, it would be lovely to do all these things, but actually, if I'm going to shift this business in the next few weeks, there's only a few things I realistically can do. I like to just work with 3 goals at the moment. They're a bit broad in terms of they've got subsets to them, but I'd like to think in terms of if I can get those 3 moving for myself, and one of them's always a personal thing, the other 2 are business related. That's a way in which I can and even then, it's a constant learning process. I come to the end of each week, I'll do my weekly plan, and I score the previous week, and sometimes like I'm getting 30%, and I'm going, yeah, but look what happened last week. You also learn to recognize the things that are not in your control. Like I'm going to have 3 meetings with clients this week, and they cancel, for example. And you go, well, I didn't get that, and now I have to rethink how that's going to work, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then you start to get creative too on that, right? Because if it really takes 3 meetings a week for you to hit your goal, and the 3 this week canceled, then you start pulling meetings ahead. You go into next week and you pull those for this week, and you do whatever you can to get your 3 this week, even though they canceled, because otherwise you're not going to hit your goal. And so it's that kind of creativity and resourcefulness that it draws out of you. When you're really committed to executing and accomplishing these things, you're going to surprise yourself with what you do and how you figure out ways to make it happen.
Yeah. So now I want to take the conversation to a little bit of another level, right? So this is undoubtedly very useful for entrepreneurs and even independent people. What about people working in large corporations or organizations who might be thinking, yeah, this will never work in my company? Or the title of this podcast is Leading People, right? It's all about leading people, talking about leading people. So let's get it now into this realm of there's a team of people in a big organization, and there are lots of systemic factors going to kick in around that. And I do know that you do a lot of work with big organizations. So it's not just the solopreneur or the entrepreneur, because we often can have more control over these factors. So now unpack this for people who work in big organizations. I've got lots of listeners who work in big organizations. Yeah. So how can you go about for next year? Let's say you're going to research this. You're going to have to get a few colleagues on board with this, or you're running a team. What advice can you give those people now to get started with the 12-week year, and what they're likely to see and feel and hear at the end of that first 12 weeks, which is going to help them create more dynamic, more momentum in their business?
Yeah, great question. The first thing would be, I wouldn't worry about getting the entire organization on, because we work in large organizations and very few of them are completely periodized, right? They still report numbers on a rolling 52 and stuff like that. But as it relates to you and your group, you can periodize that. And so one of the things that's true is that organizations are always a reflection of their leader. And not so much what they say, but what they do. And so if you really want to apply this with your team, you've got to be a practitioner as well as a coach with it, which means you've got to be willing to work from a plan. You've got to be willing to score your execution. You've got to be willing to block your time. Otherwise, people are going to see through that pretty quickly that, this is just from your standpoint, you want them to do it, but it's something you're not willing to do. So that's an important point. And then it's really about applying the disciplines. There's 5 disciplines as a group, starting with the vision work. And the problem with most organizations with the vision work, it's always about the company. And with the 12-week year, that's not where we start. We start with your individual life. And so as a leader, what you're going to want to do is take some of the resources we give you and work with people on their personal visions first, and then together create a vision for your department, your area, whatever it is, whatever your group is responsible for. And from there, then we can set the goals and build the plan. But we do that as a group so that people participate in that. That's how you get buy-in. That's how you get ownership. Otherwise, if as the leader you create all that and you hand it to people, now you got to sell them on it. And you may get some of them on board, but there's some of them not going to come on board. And so really involving them in the process. But in order to have a high-performance team, there's three structures that have to be in place regardless of what you value, whether you value innovation, whether you value collaboration or customer service or whatever it is. You need clarity of expectation at the vision level, at the goal level, and most importantly, at the behavior level, which is why the plans have to be tactical. You need transparency with respect to execution. Right? You need everyone on a team needs to be able to see how everyone else is executing. In other words, there's nowhere to hide if you're on the team. And then the third thing is evidence of whether or not it's working. And so one of the cool things about the 12-week year is it brings all those things into play. They're a byproduct of applying these disciplines and applying the process. Is you'll have clarity of expectation. You'll have transparency with respect to execution. You'll have evidence against results. And so, it brings the team together, creates ownership and buy-in. And as I said, there's nowhere to hide. And so depending on how large your team is, some people won't like that. And they may choose to leave. But that's okay. We had, this was a small group actually. It had 5 people on the sales team. I think the total team was like 10. Yeah. And they began to apply the 12-week year. We were working with them, but the first month, one of the sales guys quit. By the end of the first 12 weeks, a second had quit. So they went from 5 salespeople down to 3. Interestingly, though, sales were up 35%. So, the people that didn't want to get on board weren't producing anyways, and they were getting in the way of the other folks. So as a leader, don't be surprised that some people are going to be slow to get on board. Some people aren't going to get on board. That's why you've got to be committed. You've got to be committed as a practitioner and as a coach. But if you're committed to it, it works phenomenally well. And I think it almost works better with teams because there's no way to drop out, right? If I don't feel like doing it today, the whole team's on board, and we're talking about what got done every week and how I performed and how the rest of the team performed. And so it really, as I said earlier, there's nowhere to hide, which is a good thing.
Yeah, remind me what you use a term for holding each other accountable. What kind of, you talk about setting up groups. What can you remind me what you call that? Yeah, so we talk about
WHAMs, and we really are big on this notion of dispelling the misnotion of holding people accountable. In fact, we got a new book coming out for the end of the year called Uncommon Accountability, because that's the most misunderstood concept in society and business. And every organization talks about holding their people accountable, and what they're talking about is creating negative consequences when people don't do what they're supposed to do. And that actually impedes performance. In fact, you'll never get discretionary effort with negative consequences. You get just enough to stop the consequences, and you get all this collateral damage. And so, understanding the concept of accountability as ownership, as choice, is truly a game changer for individuals and entire organizations, because how you think about accountability as a leader affects everything you do with your team. How you think about accountability as an individual affects everything in your life, from your health to your relationships to your fulfillment, your career, your income, all of it.
So can you just explain to our listeners what you mean by a WHAM?
Yeah, WHAM is just an acronym,
isn't it?
It's a George Michael thing, No, WHAM is an acronym that stands for Weekly Accountability Meeting, and that is so our group we engage with the 12-week year in our organization as a leadership team, and so we have a team plan versus each of us having individual plans. And so we have a set of goals. Some of the tactics have my name, some have Michael, some have Judy's, blah, 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 blah. But once a week, we get together for our WHAM, and we start with the successes from last week. And then we look at the lead and lags, and then we go through the plan, what was due last week and what got done. And then we go around the table, and each of us reports out on how we executed the prior week. And so because we're scoring the execution, we're going to announce a score. I got an 83 or I got a 54, whatever it is. And people press in on that, right? If you had a bad week, they're going to ask what happened. What are you going to do different this week? How are you going to get caught up? That type of thing. So that as a group, we're confronting the execution breakdowns on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And what that also brings into play, and I'm going to introduce the concept, but I'm going to suggest people read the book, and that is, this relates to people's time management, or the notion of time management, right? And you've got some great advice on that, but I'm going to let people, they go get the book to get more information on some of that stuff, right? If you were to leave our listeners, we'll get to the end now, if you were to leave our listeners with a couple of key tips that they could start to explore immediately, apart from now, of course, going out and buying the book, and you have the field guide as well. I recommend the field guide to people. It's also an excellent book. What would be a couple of tips that you could give our listeners now to start to get their head around this concept of the 12-week year? What would be a few things to get them started? In the final few minutes, Brian provides his top tips on getting started with the 12-week year, information on some new books that are coming out soon, and details about a free e-learning course to get you started.
Yeah, one is that just start with the vision, because that's the why. And if you're going to create a different result in any area of your life, there's going to be some things you're going to have to do that you haven't done before, which means there's discomfort, there's uncertainty, and you need a compelling why to do that. That's the vision part. So spend some time on that before you immediately create a 12-week goal. And once you do that, I think the goal will be easier to set. But here's the other thing: just start. Right? I don't know when you're going to hear this. We're talking, it's late October, and so the natural tendency, well, I'll start this January 1st. Why? Why wait? Why not start in October, November? Just start and walk it out. Give yourself some grace. The 12-week year is a guilt-free zone. We can't change anything about the past, but we can learn from it. And so set a 12-week goal, create a few critical actions, right? Don't put everything you can think of in your plan, because it's overwhelming. And you don't need that. What you need are the critical few, the most important things for you to accomplish the goal, and then just work on those things weekly. And it's not about being perfect. It's just about being more consistent with your execution.
Yeah, and consistent is a very important word in virtually every execution. Whether you're in sales or marketing or any aspect of business. Or any aspect of life, having the ability to deliver things on a repeated basis to a certain standard will always stand you in good stead, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not about knowing, it's about doing. And so we all have great intentions, and I think we tend to judge ourselves by intentions, the world judges us by our actions. And so the 12-week year will help you align your actions more consistently with your intentions.
Yeah. So otherwise, everything is a hypothesis. It's all hypothetical, and it's all just thoughts in our heads. If we don't do stuff, we never know then what we can do or can achieve unless we get out and do, as you say, just get started. So what's next for Brian Moran and his team? You've got this new book coming out. I think there's also somebody has taken your concept now, if I'm not mistaken, and applied the 12-week year concept to writing a book. Is that right?
Yeah, so interestingly, our publisher came along and said they wanted us to think about franchising the 12-week year, which is kind of like chicken soup for the soul, right? There's chicken soup for the dog soul, and so about that time, a gentleman approached Mike, who Michael knew. He was a professor, and he was writing a book on writing, and he wanted to use the 12 year as the framework because that's what he used, and so we came out with 12-week year for writers, and Trevor, Michael, and I put that book together, and it just came out last month. And so I think the stat I saw, about 82% of people, adults, would like to write a book in their lifetime. Most never will. Get this book and get it done. It really combines the 12-week year with Trevor's wisdom on what it takes to write. Whether you intend to write a book or you want to write blogs, or you just want to write more. And again, whether it's a novel or business or whatever it is, it's a really good book to help you get your writing done.
And Uncommon Accountability, who's that for? Who have you written that book for?
That's for everybody. There's an aspect of it where we kind of broke the book into two pieces. One is that the personal accountability, which is the foundation of organizational accountability, and understanding what accountability is and what it isn't. And then there's accountability as a leader. And we don't narrow it to just leaders in business. I mean, so many people are leaders in their home, in their families, in their places of worship, in their communities. And so leading their children, right? I mean, it applies at every level in terms of a leader. So pretty broad audience, actually, because I think that's one of those concepts, Jerry, that if you really understand it, it's probably the most empowering concept you have to live the life you want to live.
Yeah.
More than anything else I've ever experienced.
Okay, so I'm going to put some links in the show notes. How do people get in contact with you, Brian? I think you even have sort of a free course that you can offer them, or just tell us a little bit about how to contact you.
You bet. 12weekyear.com. So the digits 12weekyear.com is where you can find us. We've got a Getting Started course, which is a series of 3 emails spaced over about a week that'll help you with the vision and the plan and that. And you can get that at 12weekyear.com/getting started. We also have online training all the way up to one-on-one individual performance coaching. So if we can help in any way, let us know.
Yeah, and I guess you go into organizations. So if anybody out there would like to have you come in and do a session with a team,
we do them live in person. We do them virtual. We've got a studio, and so very interactive stuff.
Yeah, and the classic one, I guess, is LinkedIn. Are you open to people connecting with you on LinkedIn?
Sure. LinkedIn, Facebook, you can find us.
Very good. Okay. Well, Brian, this has been a fantastic opportunity to talk to you about this wonderful system you have, and I really recommend it to people out there. And I'm really grateful for you sharing the kind of essence of how you formulated it and what makes it work so well, and those insights and wisdom that you have accumulated along the way. So I'd like to thank you again for being my guest.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. You'll find details of what we covered in the show with links, etc. in the show notes. Please share your key takeaways from today's guest and let your friends and colleagues know about the podcast. Oh, and if there's a particular author or leading thinker you'd like me to interview, just get in touch and I'll do my best to get them on the show. This episode was brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Until next time.